This is the Ivy League Hoops Hour, where we cover all things men's basketball in the Ancient Eight. We are your hub, your go-to, your day one, but not really, though. I'm your co-host, Coach Sidney Johnson, former head coach of the Princeton Tigers from 2007 and 2011, and former three-time captain of the Tigers in 95, 96, and 97. My co-host is Princeton alumnus and former Princeton graduate assistant coach, Lawrence L. Boogie Schuler. And Lawrence, we have a terrific show highlighted by our interview with a spectacular young man from the University of Pennsylvania, Jelani Williams, and a whole lot more. Let's get started. Lawrence, I got to settle the score real quick, and I'm going to grab the microphone. I'm going to let you respond, but I got to settle the score, and I'm going to just go with this for a minute, and then we'll circle back to you. You know, there was something real sneaky that you slid in last week talking about coaches who need to be in suits on the sideline, and maybe you were just talking for yourself, but I have to respond. One thing I'll just tell you is if a coach wants to put on a suit during a college basketball game, a high school pro, what have you, if they choose that of their free mind, have at it. God bless you. I'm just going to say for the record, wearing a suit on the sideline within the coaching fraternity is easily one of the dumbest things that we do. And I mean dumb. That environment where you're meeting your guys where you're at, you're in a hot, intense, competitive, and that's the best part of this thing is we're going at you, you're going at us. We got the crowd, we got the students, the hype, the whole thing, and suiting up for that to me is ridiculous and not really connected to the environment that you're in. You want to meet your players where they're at. Again, it's the environment. It's going at each other and getting in a suit and tie and all getting all sweaty and dripping, pouring sweat in your pits and through a dress shirt and God knows what you're paying for these suits anyway and fancy shoes. Dumb. Makes no sense to me whatsoever. But if you want to do it, have at it. What I don't like and what I'm speaking to, Boogie, is frankly, folks telling me what I need to be doing, how I need to be dressing, how our staff needs to be dressing, fans, administrators. Boogie, I'm looking at you, okay? Because if you haven't been in that environment, then you shouldn't be trying to dress me and my staff. You don't know what the role is, the responsibilities, the intensity of the event. And when I'm working hard and trying to get my guys to work hard, again, meet them where they're at. I keep saying that, talking to the officials and not losing your mind, but getting worked up, something like I'm getting worked up now. I don't need a suit. I don't need a suit and a tie. And there's a place for it. When you represent your institution, whether it's, you're meeting donors, you're at a networking event with your student athletes, you're at the banquet, suit it up, get nice, get cleaned up, suit, tie, shoes, the whole thing. I get it. Not in a basketball game. It's just not the time and not the place. And I never understood it. I'm glad that coaches have gotten out of that, whether it's the pros or colleges, and they're wearing, what's most comfortable for them to coach and coach hard. And administrators specifically, there are times where just because you're the boss doesn't mean you know what you're doing all the time. All right, respectfully. And that's as far as I'm going to go with that. But there are times, the best part of being a boss, whether it's high school, college, pro, this is athletics. The best part of it is knowing what you're great at. And I'm going to get to you. Well, I'm going to let you get in here. But knowing what you're good at, boss, and reveling, thriving in that lane. And then the things that you know less of, empowering really good people to do their thing and let them make a decision. And that would be this case. And by the way, Lawrence, and this is my last point, as you're trying to tell me and my staff, men's basketball, I want to be a fly on the wall as you go next door or you walk down the hall. For those that don't know, In college, oftentimes, the men's and women's basketball offices are right next door to each other, or down the hall from each other. I want to be the fly on the wall, Boogie, as you walk down that or go to the next door office with the women's basketball coach and tell her what she needs to be wearing, suit, dress, whatever. I would love to see that. Okay, tell a grown woman in this day and age what she needs to be wearing. Can't wait for that conversation. By the way, ludicrous, absolutely ludicrous to think that someone would fix their lips to tell a woman in this day and age what she and her staff need to be wearing. So if you're not going to do that, which you shouldn't, don't come at me, Boogie. Don't come at me with what I need to be wearing on the sideline. I'm going to let you go.
So, Coach, I thank you for your point of order. I think my response would be this. Firstly, listening to the first two episodes, I think our listeners could appreciate that during our time together at Princeton, the thing I excelled at was finding new ways of annoying you. And I think on this occasion, it's no exception. All right. Secondly, I agree with your point that it's important to meet your players where they're at. Right? At the same time, insofar as there are roles for coaches and administrators and players. Not to put too fine a point on it, but the coaches don't have to box anybody out. The coaches don't have to get any rebounds. And so, yes, I know you're coaching hard, all right, but if we're coaching hard and we're really sweating that much, I think we just may just need to get into better shape, get a cardiovascular check. Because I don't know how,
blow, brother.
I don't know how wearing a tie impinges on your ability to work the referees or to get up and down the sideline. I mean, even if you are wearing a pullover, right, or a polo, right, if you're still in dress shoes, you haven't changed anything. Thirdly, right, I don't think that this issue is in any way novel or new. In fact, I had this discussion back when I was in college, and back then it was about wearing hats indoors. Yes, I know that most people won't get offended if you wear a hat indoor these days, right? But as a matter of courtesy, if you know that the person that you're speaking to indoors, right, you walk into their office, if you know that they perceive you taking off your hat in their presence as a courtesy, you don't have to extend that courtesy. But if you know that it is one, why wouldn't you extend it? Lastly, I would just gently point out that when you yourself change the dress code from wearing the team-issued warm-ups on the bus to the game and for players not in uniform on the bench, when you change the dress code to jacket and tie, I don't recall you complaining or qualifying your instructions as it's somehow an imposition or unreasonable. And I think the point there was for players to meet you at your level. And I don't dispute your reasons for doing it. And I personally, my own teams, I put it in a game day dress code. But I think whatever reasons that you have for putting in that dress code in terms of dressing for success or establishing your image and representing your school, I think the argument is just as compelling for coaches on the sideline.
And now so, America knows just how slick L Boogie is. You want to go ahead and use my stuff to prove your point. It's something I did and can't possibly refute because it was from years ago. Yeah, you got me, Boogie. You got me on that one. But I'll tell you this, all right? And I'm going to let you finish your point because I went on forever. But I also had, at Fairfield, I had my guys come to me and say, hey, Coach, can we go more casual? All right. When we were scheduled for a long trip, we were actually going overseas to Italy, L Boogie. And they said, Coach, come on, can we go more casual? It's going to be a long flight. And I met them where they were at, Lawrence. So I've learned. And so, yes, you can use my stuff against me and prove your point, Slick. I'm going to call you Slick Boogie from now on. But you might have a point there. It's just it's where your lens is at and where I'm at right now. I'm just not feeling these suits.
Well, I freely accept that the suits and the ties on the sideline are old-fashioned, but of course, then again, so am I, and I make absolutely no apology for it.
Eyes Don't Lie to Me, our segment in the Ivy League Hoops Hour, where we choose our picks for Game of the Week, Player of the Week, and Team of the Week. Not in any particular order, but we try to cover on all three. And this was an interesting week so far, 2 weeks in now, in terms of the college basketball season. And Boogie, I'm going to go with my game of the week. I'm going to start with Binghamton, Columbia. Columbia was going into the game winless. Binghamton had picked up a win, but Jim Engels did not want to go 0-3 at that point in the season, playing Binghamton at home, a team that they should beat and they needed to beat, and good for the Ivy League. They did beat. The Lions came through, not without, dramatics. There was a point, Boogie, 12 minutes to go in the game where there was, according to the ESPN win probability tracker, there was a 1.4% chance that the Columbia Lions were going to win the game. And with 6 minutes to go, that percentage or probability dropped to 1.1%. Absolutely amazing. Down 16 points. The Lions came storming back. Jim Engels and his staff did a terrific job of going to a full court press. They were just a lot more active. Josh Odunowu was a kid off the bench for them, undersized, gets a lot of stuff done, a little bit more effective than Patrick Harding, who's in the starting lineup for them. So I think that kid's got to play more, and I'm sure he will. Columbia's got to shore up, giving up too many drives, but it was a big, really important win. A lot of good contributions, good defense, good coaching there. So I'm going with that game. Columbia winning at home against Binghamton.
I'd say my game of the week, I'm going to look to Cornell again. Cornell, Penn State. Tough loss for Cornell, but they had a 10-point lead at one point in the first half, and they were playing very well in the second half. They put all kinds of pressure on Penn State. They had them turning the ball over. They were moving the ball up and down, and it felt like an NCAA tournament game. So forcing turnovers, or hitting their shots, attacking the rim, getting offensive rebounds. They played a heck of a game, and in the end, it didn't go their way, but they have a lot they can take away from that game and use going forward. And with that in mind, my player of the week is Sarju Patel. An incredible performance.
Well, his performance may have been matched by Ethan Wright, and not trying to line myself too much with the Ivy League, official Ivy League picks for the week, but Ethan Wright bested everyone as player of the week, and I tend to agree. So I'm going to pick him. He's the top rebounder in the league, although he's a 6'3" guard. He had 24 points and 10 rebounds in a win against Oregon State, which is the second of two high major wins for the Princeton Tigers so far. In the last 3 games, Ethan Wright is shooting 55% from three and averaging 17.6 points per game. So I'm going to go with him for player of the week. Our team of the week is Cornell. The Cornell Big Red are 4-1, and their only loss, as L Boogie mentioned, is to Penn State. They were leading the game with 6 minutes to go, so they played, 34. All right, yeah, everybody knows now I was a history major at Princeton. 34 minutes of really good basketball. Their pace has been excellent, and Cornell arguably has the best offense in the league. There's a lot with the eye test and also with the analytics that back that up, and so Big Red are playing really well. You've got L Boogie and my game of the week, player of the week, and we're both going with Cornell at 4-1 as the team of the week. Hello, we've got a special guest now with the Ivy League Hoops Hour guest segment, and it is a 5th-year senior playing in his first season of Division I basketball. You heard that correctly, folks. And I have to tell you personally, watching this young man and getting acclimated with his story in terms of his return to the court is one thing. His leadership off the court is a whole nother level. And so we have a wonderful story to share with you. we have none other than the University of Pennsylvania Quaker fifth-year senior and captain of the men's basketball team, Jelani Williams. Jelani, thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me. How you guys doing?
We are doing terrific. Excited to have this conversation. My co-host Lawrence Schuler is with us. And Lawrence, you and I have been prepping for this conversation with Jelani. Thrilled to get this started. Lawrence, I'm going to turn it over to you real quick.
Jelani, thanks for joining us. Just as a backdrop, I'm from New Jersey. So as far as I'm concerned, New Jersey is the center of the universe. But I know guys who played in the DMV. They feel the same way about the DMV. So tell us what we need to know about your AAU team, your high school team, about you, and how playing the DMV prepared you.
Yeah, well, I come from, in my opinion, the best basketball area in the country. DMV, I grew up in Maryland, in PG County, Maryland, and moved to D.C. at about the 10th grade. Played AAU basketball with Team Takeover, which is on the EYBL circuit, one of the top programs in the country. And I went to high school. I graduated from high school in 2017 from Sidwell Friends School, where I'm at right now, actually, watching my little brother practice. So a lot of good coaches that I played for, a lot of good players that I played with, that competed against. And I think that all prepared me very well for transitioning into college basketball, which I've finally been able to do this year.
That's great. That's great. And before we go any further, we have to acknowledge the ESPN article. If you haven't read it, it's a great read. You should check it out. With that article in mind, there's still a chapter left to write in terms of your season here going forward. But can you tell us how you feel at this moment?
Yeah, I've just, the last couple of weeks, I've just been feeling super grateful. Obviously, the first game at Florida State was a very emotional day for me. And then, being able to play my first home game against Lafayette about a week ago was great for me as well. And that night was actually when I talked to Myron Metcalf over at ESPN, and the article came out the next day. And from there, just a lot of publicity, which was great. But for me, it's just been about getting back on the court and being able to continue to improve and compete with my teammates. That's been, something that I've missed for so long. It's something that I've been super grateful for. So, for the people that don't know about my story, it's been a really long road back to the court. There's been a couple publications that kind of go in detail about, what I've endured since about 2016, late 2016. But for me, man, just feeling a lot of gratitude as of late. Obviously we played a tough slate this first 2 weeks of the season, playing a lot of games. And so sore, definitely, but definitely grateful to be able to get back out there and compete with my guys.
Jelani, 3 ACL tears, the first one occurring your senior year in high school, correct?
Yep, 2016, December 2016.
Right, so you have that setback. You have 2 more ACL tears. You're dealing, then you face the COVID shutdown, and there's a lot more serious things than just not playing basketball, but, you were trying to return to the court. So you go almost 5 years between competitive games. Just amazing. Can you let us in a little bit on the emotion in that article? I again echo what Lawrence said, but captured a lot in terms of ESPN. Metcalf doing a really good job with you, but something that jumped out is you had a lot of family and friends at that first game back. What was the emotion like in that regard?
Yeah, I mean, it was a lot for me. I think my first game, I was really trying to just kind of hold it all together. Getting called out in the starting lineup and seeing my dad and my little brother, who had made the trip from DC down to Tallahassee to see me play. Obviously my aunt and uncle who live out there were there, and a couple other family members that were in the Florida area came to see me play. So it was just a lot of emotion, people texting me and calling me the day before and, the day of, and just kind of still trying to figure out how to focus on the game, but also taking in all of the extra stuff around it, me coming back to the court and being able to, just compete with my guys. It was definitely a lot for me. And I think that lasted probably the first 3 halves of basketball that I had to play. Our second game, we had a tough matchup at George Mason, which was close to home for me out in Virginia. Right. And I had a lot more family and friends there than I did at the Florida State game. That was a pretty hostile environment. But that was great for me just to see, my high school coach there, my AAU coaches, my family, my friends, just the people that have been in my corner since, the first ACL dating back almost 5 years now. So that was really emotional for me. And I was just grateful that I made it back for them to be able to see me play and them being able to see it in person. That meant a lot to me.
You did make it back, and you will always be able to hold on to that. Not knowing you, but even just hearing you talk about it now, I'm just so proud for you and happy for all those folks who love you. In that article, this jumped out at me, and if you don't mind, I want to share some words that you shared in the article. You said the reason I kept getting hurt was because I never dealt with the mental aspect of what I was going through. When I tore my ACL the second time, I was really in a bad place mentally. I wasn't being honest with myself. I think that's literally the biggest part of my story. Jelani, I have to ask you if you're comfortable sharing with us. I don't want to miss it. I don't want Lawrence to miss it or our listeners. We don't want to miss the biggest part of your story and your words. What can you share with us in that regard?
Yeah, I mean, growing up in the DMV, especially, basketball is so huge here. And it's something that I say I loved probably more than anything else growing up in middle school, high school, even elementary school, just playing basketball and coming up here. And not being able to play for 1 year was very mentally draining for me. But, to miss year after year after year and miss 4 seasons in a row, it really took a toll on me mentally. I think something that gets overshadowed a lot of the time with athletes that are coming back from injuries is the mental aspect of, being able to look at injury in the face and go through the grind without being able to play basketball and come back every day. I think that's the biggest thing is like, especially in an ACL injury and the rehab process, you're doing a lot of the same stuff every day for months on end. The recovery process is really slow and it can get really frustrating at times. And so for me, my first one, I was always growing up as a high school kid. And even before that, I was always a kid that kind of, tried to project what I wanted people to believe about me. And so what I thought toughness was, being able to take whatever challenge was in front of me and, fail some, succeed some, but at the end of it say, I'm good, brush it off and continue to move forward. And I think it got to a certain point, my sophomore year of college was really the hardest year of my life. Going through another ACL tear in a situation where I felt like the team needed me to be that extra guard on the court, to be a leader, and feeling like I couldn't really give them that to the extent that I wanted to, especially with how hard I worked after my first ACL tear to really improve on my game and improve my body. And to go through that really took a toll on me. And instead of dealing with the mental side of that and really digging into my emotions and digging into what was wrong with me mentally, I kind of just did the same thing that I had become accustomed to. I pushed my emotions to the back burner. I pushed my mental health to the back burner. And I just tried to attack the rehab again as well as I could. And, I think that's kind of what led to me injuring myself for the third time. I think, I really pushed myself in the rehab, but I wasn't all the way invested. I was skipping days. I wasn't taking full advantage of the opportunity I had every day to get better. And I think that was because I wasn't addressing, the mental health challenges and the depression and the anxiety and all the things that I was going through. And it really took me until I injured myself a third time to say, all right, I need to go talk to somebody. And I need to deal with all of this stuff so that I can go into rehab with a clear mind and with a fresh motivation because, without those things, it's impossible to attack an obstacle like a torn ACL to the fullest that you can.
Jelani, I just, really appreciate you sharing that. And as you are, I think one of the challenges that mental unhealthiness, if you will, presents is that you feel so alone. You feel that in some ways when you're talking about anxiety and depression, the stress that that you may not understand yourself as you're looking at yourself when you're going through something, and then you don't feel like anyone can relate to you or help you with that anguish and struggle. And the way that you're talking about it, I can imagine some of our listeners will appreciate your honesty. And I'm just wondering, what you've learned, do you imagine that you can take that and share that with others and serve others just so that they know that they're not alone in this?
Yeah, you're definitely right about that. I mean, I had a lot of days in this process where I did feel very lonely. I lived with my teammates my freshman, sophomore, junior year, even senior year. Now I live with my teammates. And for me, I hated watching practice and not being able to play in practice. So a lot of the times in my sophomore year and my junior year, I kind of would skip practice. Like I would go to school, I would go to rehab, I would go home and, do some homework, watch TV and wait for my teammates to get home. And that was kind of the everyday routine for me that kind of kept sinking me down into that deep place I was talking about earlier. And it got really lonely. I mean, a lot of times when you're in PT, it's really just you and your physical therapist and your thoughts. You kind of feel like you're going through it all alone. And that's sort of what made the difference for me my third time around when I decided to take the semester off from school, really separate myself from, the stresses of being at an Ivy League school and being on the basketball team, and being on campus and just being in that environment, and really focus on myself and my mental health and my physical health and my spiritual health, and lean on my support system. I went home and, was cared for by my mom and my dad, who had always been there for me, but it was a little different, being 2.5, 3 hours away from home versus living with them every day. And I was really able to lean on them and lean on my therapist and lean on my relationship with God and continue to push through that. But it did get very lonely for a while up until that point. And I think, for kids that are going through mental health struggles and injuries and things like that, like, I think that's the biggest thing that I learned is, like, don't go through it alone. Don't feel like you have to go through it alone. Find people that are in your corner, that want to support you, that love you, and really just embrace that, because it makes all the difference for you.
Thank you. Thank you for that. Thank you for sharing that. And as you repaired yourself and got back, got back good mentally, now let's be real. Let's talk about the court. And there's just the reality of being injured, and, they can take a toll physically. And so whether that's just physical strength or things that you're used to doing, there's a Clark Kellogg is a CBS analyst and a former great player. He talks about spurtability, and maybe your explosiveness. So just now let's talk about the physical part of now you're back on the court, Jelani. It's been fantastic to watch and see you play, but you know yourself better than anyone. In terms of your body, are you moving differently in terms of your injuries? And if that's a yes, how have you had to adapt your game to still be effective?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. I think, obviously going through multiple knee injuries and major surgeries, you lose some spurt. You can. I'm not jumping as high as I was when I was a 17-year-old kid in high school. My first step is still pretty good, but obviously not the same extent. So I think I'm moving pretty well for someone who has been through 3 ACL surgeries, but there's obviously some lag just in terms of getting my timing back right, getting my feet back under me and things like that. And I'm still in that process of figuring out, my timing and getting everything on the same page. But for me, I watched a lot of film. I watched a lot of Derrick Rose and the way that he returned from his injuries and the way that he had to change his game. I watched, point guards that are more cerebral. I watched a lot of Chris Paul.
Yeah.
I watch a lot of guys that I think just really read the game at a higher level. And that's something that I try to incorporate into my game, not having to be able to beat somebody off the dribble on the first step or jump over somebody to get a layup or a dunk or rebound or something like that. I think for me, it's been, figuring out that balance between still making the plays where I can and being athletic in the ways that I still am, but also figuring out how to read the game, how to pick my spots better, working on my jump shot, working on my touch around the rim, different things like that can, help me to still be effective and still make an impact on the game without, being the athlete that I was before the injuries.
On the Ivy League Hoops Hour, we are so fortunate to have great guests like Jelani Williams and David McLaughlin from last week. And so if there are interesting folks throughout the league. I know that we see plenty in terms of the coaches and student athletes, administrators, maybe an official, God help us. But anybody that you think would be someone great to have on the show, please write in, let us know what you think, and contact us at ivyleaguehoopshour@gmail.com with your suggestions on guests. Let's get back to joining University of Pennsylvania's men's basketball senior captain, Jelani Williams. Well, I like that you mentioned cerebral, and you're wise, Jelani, wise beyond your years, and that wisdom to me has not limited itself to on the court. We'd be remiss if we did not cover this before we let you go. I mean, you've taken a leadership role as it relates to discussions of race, diversity, equity, inclusion on campus, the surrounding area in Philly. And I want to dive into that. First and foremost, I just say in terms of your Penn experience, whether it's academics, social interactions, being on a basketball team, again in Philly, how has your Penn experience influenced the formation of your voice and your activism in regards to these issues?
Yeah, I think I really found my voice at Penn. I think, a little bit more background about me. I grew up, like I said, in PG County. Went to public school in middle school with mostly, Black kids. Like PG County is majority Black county. And then I went to Sidwell Friends for high school, which is, prestigious, wealthy, mostly white people and kids and parents and faculty and all those things. And that was a bit of a culture shock for me. I didn't really know how to maneuver those spaces. And it probably took me about 3.5 out of the 4 years I was at Sidwell to really figure out how to maneuver those situations. But I do think that I gained a lot of experiences that paid off for me. When I got to college, I was able to kind of figure out how to read situations a little bit better. And then honestly, the Africana Studies department at the University of Pennsylvania gave me an opportunity to really dive into the history of this country and the history of the world as it relates to African Americans, to Africans, the whole diaspora. And just learn more things about, the history behind that and start to see how it affects today. And I think that's really where I gained my voice. I was able to kind of notice things differently that were happening, whether it be at Penn or at large across the country, across the world. And I felt like it just gave me the knowledge that I needed to kind of find my voice and just be a little bit more vocal about, a lot of the issues that we have in society today. I think that's part of, what I'm trying to do now. It's been, my last 1.5 years here, last 2 years here at Penn. I've really tried to make as much of an impact as I can on those fronts.
I've heard you state that you challenged the University of Pennsylvania to have more representation of Black students and faculty and to have more Black coaches and administrators. I'd like our listeners, I'm personally very interested to hear from your vantage point. Can you share what it means to have more representation of Black coaches and administrators? Like what actual effect and influence does it have on you? And, what you would imagine or believe that it has on the University of Pennsylvania? Yeah,
it means a lot. I mean, especially I'll start with just from a student standpoint. Like I said, in high school, when I got to Sidwell, it was a majority white environment. I think we had one Black teacher in the entire high school. And that became an issue for a lot of our, students of color here. But it's a similar situation at Penn. There's not that many Black professors and faculty members and administrators. And as a student, especially in a predominantly white institution like that, means everything to you to feel like you have someone who can relate to what you're going through, who understands the environment that you're in, who you feel like you can confide in and things like that. I think that makes all the difference for a kid trying to figure out, what they want to do and what they want to be in life, which is what college is supposed to be for. And, for me, the professors that I have had that are Black, I still keep in contact with people that I talk to, as much as possible, that I go and lean on for support. Chaz Howard is a huge influence for me on campus at Penn that I lean on a lot for, social things, but also just someone who I feel like I can talk to and relate to and really just have normal conversation with. But then also as far as like administration, and it's important to have people of color in power, because some of the things that us as students, as student athletes, want to see and call for, like the like more representation and coaching and things like that. A lot of those things are above our power reach and above the spaces that we can get into and talk to. So having someone that understands that struggle and understands why that's so important, be in those conversations and have a seat at the table, can make all the difference. And I think that, we have some people in the department, in the athletics department and at the university that are on the right side of this issue and of these issues. But I think that having more people that directly relate to that experience will continue to push the needle forward in a way that it needs to.
Well, you are pushing the needle forward. I can tell you that much. And you need to have a seat at whatever table. Just this last 20, 25 minutes for me and Lawrence to listen to you and your story, and not only what you've learned and how Penn has had an influence on you, but Jelani, dare I say that I think that you're having a great impact on University of Penn and Ivy League in general. The last question I'd have is just moving forward, if there's anything that you want for your team, for the University of Penn, for Ivy League athletics, anything moving forward that you would love to see in the very near future, I want you to take the stage and share that with us.
Yeah, I think, just for my team to start, I think, I just want for us to keep improving. We're coming off of losing some great players in AJ Broder and Ryan Betley and Devin Goodman, and still figuring out our identity as a team and where everybody fits into that. So for us, I just want us to keep improving. I think we've made some great strides since our first game. And I just want us to keep trending in that direction so that, when we get to Ivy League play, we're in the best spot that we can be. And when it gets around the March, when things really start to count and matter, we're playing the best Penn basketball that we can. So for us, I think we're doing that thus far in the season. I think we just got to continue to move forward and continue to improve. And then as far as like the university and the league at large, I would like to see a little bit more of a commitment. I know that during the summer of 2020, and when the entire world was protesting and there were conversations being had across the board about racial injustice, social injustice across, all areas, there were some initiatives that the Ivy League had said to commit themselves to. For one, the coaching staffs and the Ivy Promise. I know that got scratched. And then there was a 8 Against Hate campaign that we got like T-shirts around, that were supposed to mean, something as far as what the Ivy League was committing itself to. And, that got scratched as well by the higher ups. And so I just, I'm a little bit tentative just to be honest about the level of commitment that the Ivy League does have to these issues and like really, putting our force behind it because we are some of the most, influential institutions in the country. But I would like to see more of a commitment. I would like to see, each school kind of dig into their community, their surrounding community, especially the ones that are in cities, us being surrounded by Philly, which is like, the poorest big city on the East Coast, Harvard being surrounded by Boston, Columbia being in New York, like those kinds of schools. I would love to see them continue to make commitments in those communities and really try and help out the surrounding community as much as possible. Because I think we have all the resources and all the power and all of the people to do it and to continue to make great strides. And I think there has been progress that's been made. But, for me, in my last year, I would like to see us continue to push the needle and start to take the lead on a lot of these issues.
Well, for the causes that you speak of, I think we owe it to ourselves to be real in terms of our actions and not necessarily performance art. You know what I'm saying? To have something very significant behind us. And I'll be following you. I'll tell you that much. One thing, I don't want to make light of anything that we've talked about because it's real life and a lot more important. And you've enlightened us so much on and off the court. But I'll just, in parting, I'll say it's amazing to me that you are a Penn guy. And I'm not sure if you know that I'm a Princeton guy. And we were able to go 30 minutes without throwing any elbows or talking crap to each other. So there is hope for the world. And in hope for the world, it is putting real action behind thoughts and goals and ideas that you expressed with us, Jelani. We're so blessed and indebted for you to join us. On behalf of Lawrence and myself, thank you for joining us on the Ivy League Hoops Hour.
Absolutely. I appreciate you guys for having me.
The Ivy League Hoops Hour now gets to answer questions from our listeners. We love hearing from you all, and it was great in our first week to get some responses by email. Again, it's Ivy League Hoops Hour at gmail.com. Please send us comments, questions, feedback. Certainly subscribe, and want to put in a plug to subscribe or follow us at any and all of the areas that you might get your podcast. We're up and running and excited to be with you all season long. We also have started a hashtag Ivy League Hoops Hour, and you'll find us on Twitter in that regard. And so our first question, L Boogie has, and I'll let him kick it off for us.
Our first one is from Ian in New Jersey. He writes, I'm a huge Penn fan. I've seen a lot to like and a lot of improvement from the team over the first week plus, but there appears to be a potential structural flaw in our offense that I'm afraid could become an issue when Ivy play rolls around. Right now, Jordan Dingle appears to be the only Penn player consistently capable of creating his own shot by taking his man off the dribble, and I think that might be a direct cause of why he's taken such a high percentage of our shots. He's taken 40% of our shots when he's on the floor, which is second highest percentage of any player in Division I this year, and the highest any Penn player in the Steve Donahue era. The rotation as constructed right now has a lot of players who are good shooters, Max Smarts, Jelani Williams, Clark Slackert, and one player in Jonah Charles who looks like an elite spot-up shooter. But none of them can shake their defender free quite like Jordan can so far. It appears that teams are starting to commit more to running our secondary shooters off the three-point line, and I think that may cause issues for Jordan down the line, as so much of his game revolves around dribble penetration and looking to kick. How can those shooters respond to the defensive attention that they're getting?
Ian raises a lot of good points there, Boogie, and he's spot on in that Penn is relying a ton on the three-point shot. They rank 30th in the country in terms of percentage of points scored from the three-point line, and they actually rank 286th in the country in terms of percentage of points scored from the free throw line. So not a lot, and keep in mind this is out of 353 Division I programs. So when you're 30th in the country, that's pretty impressive. They're making shots. Side note, Princeton ranks 25th in that same regard in terms of the amount of points that they're scoring from the three-point line. Dartmouth leads the entire country. So the Ivy League is represented well in terms of three-point efficiency, but Penn is not getting to the free throw line. Yes, we know that. I would say a couple things that come to mind. A.J. Broder was pretty good, as we all know, and he was an outstanding player for the Quakers. And Steve Donahue's running the same offense now that he ran with A.J. Broder. But when you have close to 2,000 points, almost 1,000 rebounds, and very importantly, almost 400 assists, that's what A.J. Broder did over his career. Humbly speaking, I was not a bad guard in this league. I had over 400 assists. So this 6'8" wonder kid of a player in A.J. Broder was taking a lot of stress off of shooters and drivers and the whole team. And Penn doesn't have that. They have Loika Lloyd, who's very explosive. He's coming along. Spinoza is giving them a low post presence in these last few games. Loika Lloyd has been injured. That low post influence is something that's really important and will help Penn play a little bit more north-south and add some dynamics to their team. I'd also think that there's an aesthetic thing going on here, Ian, in that you are used to great Penn guards, and Dingle is on his way. He's very good, but there are great guards that give you a bit more of a north-south downhill presence in the Penn offense. A Jerome Allen, who gives me nightmares to this day. I had to face up against him as a freshman and sophomore. Michael Jordan is another great Penn guard. I had to deal, thankfully, only 1 year. I was a senior. He was a freshman. Then I went on to the pros. He terrorized the league. Ibrahim Jabber and Zach Rosen. These are outstanding Penn guards, some of the best who've ever played in the league, and they've always been able to cut up defenses, get to the rim, make it easy for others. Dingle does a little bit of that and not a lot. So one solution with all that in mind is that these other players, the other perimeter shooters, as you talked about, they can do a little bit more cutting off the ball. They can do a bit more backdoor cutting and slipping as the dribble handoff is coming towards them, whether it's Loika Lloyd or Spinoza. Those guys are usually the ones with the ball in their hands. And I do agree, Ian, that some of those perimeter guys are coming around a little bit too much. And what happens is they come around for those handoffs, they can't get the shot off, and then they try to do something off the dribble, and it just ain't working, and they get pushed further and further from the basket. Dingo's the only one who can be really effective in that sense. But those slips and those cuts off the ball, I've started to see that a bit more. So what you're seeing, what I'm seeing, Steve Donahue is seeing. And also know this, the future's very bright. There's 10 players in the Penn player rotation right now. Only one of them is a senior, fifth-year senior Jelani Williams. Glad to have him on our show this week. 9 other kids on this roster are set to come back next year, and they're growing and improving. I think you'll see a little bit more dynamic play. Donahue's on top of it, and let's look for it as these weeks play out. Our second letter comes in from John Solomon, the John Solomon. John is a current radio host on WPRB, and he hails from Princeton, New Jersey. John wrote, he actually wrote and created the PrincetonBasketball.com website. Terrific coverage of the Princeton basketball team over the years. A near and dear friend of ours, mine and Lawrence's, and many people who are close to the Princeton basketball program. And in many ways, folks, we are trying with the Ivy League Hoops Hour to be the podcast version of what PrincetonBasketball.com gave to the program. We want to cover all the programs equally and give them a platform, and we're trying to follow John Solomon's lead. So we're tipping our hat to him and thanking him for writing in. His question comes to us, and he posed the thought, I wonder how much the non-Division I games that the Ivy League teams have played in the non-conference schedule adjusted the number of possessions in a game. Good point, good thought, and Lawrence is going to take a stab at it.
It's an outstanding point because half of the league opened with a non-Division I opponent. You had Harvard play Division II Morehouse, and then you had 3 Division III opponents, Yale Vassar, Princeton Rutgers Camden, and Brown playing Salve Regina. So I took another look at the Ivy League's games against Division I opponents, and I looked specifically at games in which at least one team scored 80 points. In games through November 14th, the Ivy League went 2-7. The 2 wins were Cornell over Lafayette and Yale over UMass. But I wouldn't necessarily say that we were wrong last week. Maybe we were just a little more forward-looking. Since then, and this is games from November 15th through November 23rd, the Ivy League is 5-3, with the 5 wins being Yale over Siena, Penn over Lafayette, Princeton over Marist, Columbia over Binghamton, and then Princeton over Oregon State. So it seems that once the Ivy League got its sea legs, results started to improve the following week.
Great number crunching there, Lawrence, in terms of that pace of play and what the non-Division I games look like. And John and Ian, we appreciate you writing in, and we hope and encourage all of our listeners. Tell us what you think of the show. Give us ideas, questions, trends that you want to look at and cover. We'd love to continue this dialogue throughout the year, and we're excited to do so. In order to contact us, reach us at Ivy League Hoops Hour at gmail.com. Now we're going to look at the non-Ivy League nod of the week. And Lawrence, what do you have for us?
I think my nod has to go to the Gonzaga Bulldogs. It's not a profound statement, but they are playing very good basketball. They had a statement win over UCLA. And I know everyone talks about Chet Holmgren with good reason. I mean, he's a fantastic player. But I think more attention needs to be paid to Drew Timme, who is not just solid, but I mean, essentially perfect in everything that you would want a center to do. I mean, he's efficient around the rim, grabs rebounds, right, guards without fouling. He's phenomenal, and I think his game is really underappreciated.
Well said. Well said. I'm going to talk about a coach who's underappreciated. Robert Jones at Norfolk State has the Spartans at 6-1 with wins over Bowling Green and Middle Tennessee State. And Jones, in his time there at Norfolk State, has finished first or second in the MEAC in 6 of his 8 seasons, Lawrence. I mean, it's unbelievable what Jones has done. He's from the New York area, has recruited well from the city, but all over the place. And he's got his team primed and ready for this year to finish yet again near the top of the league in the MEAC. So I want to give a nod to Coach Jones. Before we wrap up, I know that we've got some upcoming games in the H&8 that are exciting for our listeners to pay attention to. Lawrence, why don't you help them out?
The day after Thanksgiving, and on Friday, we've got Columbia at Boston College. On Sunday, we have Penn at Arkansas. And on Wednesday, December 1st, we have URI at Harvard.
Got to pay attention to those, no doubt. Before we wrap it up, final shout out is to Dartmouth football and Princeton football. They shared the Ivy League championship in football this season. We want to tip our hat to both of them. We know that the Ivy League football doesn't qualify for the FCS 1AA for those old heads like myself. They don't play in that playoff, so their season is done. But both teams had a wonderful year, hardworking. And again, when you think about COVID and that layoff, for them to come back prime and ready, both of those teams have performed well over the years, and they just picked up right where they left off. So shout out to both schools and programs. Well done. We appreciate you guys taking your time to spend with us. We don't take it for granted. Please follow, subscribe wherever you find your podcasts. Give us as high a rating. And I think I was saying 5-star last week, Boogie, and I did my research. I think that's the best we can get. So if you can offer that up for us, we'd greatly appreciate it. This is a labor of love for me and Lawrence, and we appreciate your time with us. We'll catch you next week.